On July 14, 1919, French, British, and American troops paraded down the Champs-Élysées in Paris, celebrating their triumph in the bloody trenches of World War I. But one American regiment was missing from the Allied ranks. It hadn't been sidelined by injury or a poor service record. In fact, the 369th Infantry was one of the most decorated regiments of the war.
They fought without replacements. They fought 191 days on the front line. They never lost a foot of ground. They never lost a soldier as a prisoner.
The men, nicknamed the Harlem Hellfighters, were excluded for one simple reason. They were black.
This is the story of the 369th Infantry Regiment, the regiment that fought longer than any other American unit in World War I, the regiment that never surrendered a foot of ground, and the regiment that America nearly forgot. Chapter 1. The making of the 369th. Before America entered the war, black communities across New York organized military training programs. Many African Americans hoped military service would demonstrate patriotism and challenge racist assumptions. In 1916, these efforts led to the creation of the 15th New York National Guard Regiment. The unit attracted volunteers from Harlem and beyond. Many recruits had little military experience, but they possessed determination. Among those who supported the regiment was Colonel William Hayward. Hayward was a white officer who believed black soldiers deserved the opportunity to fight. At a time when many military leaders doubted African American troops, Hayward argued the opposite. He repeatedly pushed government officials to deploy his regiment overseas. For months, progress was slow. The War Department hesitated. Some officials preferred assigning black soldiers to labor units rather than combat formations. Yet Hayward persisted. Finally, in late 1917, the regiment received orders for France. The men celebrated. They believed they were about to join the fight for freedom. What they did not know was that another battle awaited them first, a battle against prejudice within their own military. Chapter 2. Handed over to the French. When the regiment arrived in France, the United States Army faced an uncomfortable question. What should be done with thousands of black combat soldiers? Many American commanders resisted integrating them into white units. Some questioned their abilities. Others simply refused to serve alongside them. As a result, the regiment found itself in a strange position. The United States had brought them across the Atlantic, but it did not want them fighting beside American troops. The solution came from the French. France had already employed soldiers from colonies across Africa and Asia. French officers cared more about manpower than skin color, so an agreement was reached. The regiment would be assigned to the French army. The men received French equipment, French helmets, French rifles, French training, and eventually a new designation. The 15th New York became the 369th Infantry Regiment. For many soldiers, the experience was eye-opening. French civilians welcomed them warmly. French soldiers treated them with respect. For the first time, many black Americans experienced a society where they were judged less by race and more by character. The contrast with conditions back home was impossible to ignore. Soon, the 369th entered the trenches, and they would remain there longer than any other American regiment. Chapter 3. Life in the Trenches. World War I was unlike any conflict the world had seen before. Machine guns dominated battlefields. Artillery caused massive casualties. Barbed wire stretched across landscapes scarred by explosions. Soldiers spent weeks living underground in muddy trenches. The men of the 369th quickly learned these realities. They faced constant shelling, sniper fire, disease, cold, and exhaustion. Many units rotated out of the front lines after limited periods. The 369th remained there for an astonishing 191 days, longer than any American regiment during the war. The experience forged an extraordinary reputation. French officers praised their discipline, their courage, and their willingness to fight under difficult conditions. German forces soon noticed them as well. Reports described the regiment as unusually aggressive and determined. The Germans eventually coined a nickname, Hellfighters. The name spread rapidly, and the men embraced it, because by this point, they had earned it. Chapter 4. Henry Johnson's Night of Legend. Among the most famous members of the regiment was a soldier named Henry Johnson. Before the war, Johnson worked as a baggage handler in Albany, New York. He stood only 5 feet 4 inches tall, yet he possessed extraordinary determination. On the night of May 14, 1918, Johnson and another soldier, Needham Roberts, were assigned guard duty near a French outpost. The night seemed quiet. Then everything changed. A German raiding party approached under cover of darkness. Historians estimate that more than 20 German soldiers participated in the attack. Their objective was clear: capture American prisoners for intelligence purposes. Suddenly, grenades exploded around the position. Roberts was wounded. Johnson was hit by shrapnel. The Germans advanced. The small outpost appeared doomed. Yet Johnson refused to retreat. He opened fire with his rifle. When the weapon jammed, he used it as a club. When it broke, he drew a trench knife. What followed became one of the most remarkable acts of individual bravery in American military history. Johnson fought hand-to-hand against multiple attackers. Despite serious wounds, he continued resisting. When German soldiers attempted to capture Roberts, Johnson charged forward. He slashed and stabbed with his knife. He fought until reinforcements arrived. By the end of the battle, the German raiding party had retreated. Roberts survived, and Johnson had become a legend. French authorities awarded him the Croix de Guerre, one of France's highest military decorations. He became the first American soldier of the war to receive the honor. But while France celebrated him as a hero, his own country would not. Chapter 5. The Soundtrack of a Regiment. The Harlem Hellfighters did not only make history on the battlefield, they also changed the history of music. Attached to the regiment was a military band led by Lieutenant James Reese Europe. Before the war, Europe was already one of America's most influential black musicians. He had organized major orchestras, performed at Carnegie Hall, and helped shape the development of ragtime and early jazz. When the 369th arrived in France, Europe brought 44 musicians with him. Their mission was simple: boost morale. But what happened exceeded all expectations. The band performed for French soldiers, civilians, and political leaders. Audiences were captivated. They had never heard anything quite like it. The syncopated rhythms, the energy, the improvisation. The music sounded revolutionary. Many historians credit the Harlem Hellfighters band with introducing jazz to large audiences across Europe. In cities throughout France, crowds gathered to hear them perform. Their concerts became major events. The music of Harlem was now crossing oceans, and in many ways, it was changing global culture. The Hellfighters were fighting one war in the trenches, and quietly beginning another revolution through music. Yet even as the band gained fame, the regiment continued facing the dangers of combat. Chapter 6. The Hellfighters at War. Throughout 1918, the 369th participated in major operations alongside French forces. They fought in difficult sectors, advanced through enemy fire, and repeatedly demonstrated their effectiveness. French commanders praised their courage. German soldiers learned to respect them. The regiment developed an extraordinary record. They never lost a prisoner to enemy capture. They never surrendered a position, and they maintained combat effectiveness under conditions that broke many other units. For 191 days, they remained near or on the front lines, the longest service record of any American regiment during the war. Their performance challenged racist assumptions held by many military leaders. The evidence was impossible to ignore. These men had proven themselves in battle, yet recognition remained limited. The American military often highlighted white units while overlooking the achievements of black soldiers. Still, word of the Hellfighters spread. Their reputation grew with every engagement, and when the war finally ended on November 11th, 1918, they returned home as one of the most decorated American regiments of the conflict. For a brief moment, it appeared their sacrifices might finally be acknowledged. Chapter 7. A Hero's Welcome. In February 1919, the Harlem Hellfighters returned to New York City. What followed was one of the largest celebrations in the city's history. Hundreds of thousands of people lined the streets. Some estimates placed attendance at more than 1 million spectators. The regiment marched proudly up Fifth Avenue. Crowds cheered, flags waved, bands played. For many Americans, the Hellfighters symbolized courage and victory. Newspapers celebrated their achievements. Veterans smiled for photographers. Families reunited after months of separation. The parade was a moment of triumph, a moment when it seemed the nation might finally recognize the contributions of African American soldiers. Yet beneath the celebrations, deeper problems remained. The racism that existed before the war had not disappeared. In many parts of the country, it was becoming even more violent, and the men who had fought for democracy overseas were about to discover just how fragile their welcome truly was. Chapter 8. The Red Summer. The year 1919 became known as the Red Summer. Across the United States, racial violence erupted. White mobs attacked black communities in city after city. Race riots broke out. Homes and businesses were destroyed. Hundreds of African Americans were killed. Many of the victims were veterans. Men who had worn the nation's uniform. Men who had fought in Europe. Men who expected respect upon returning home. Instead, they encountered hostility. Some white Americans viewed returning black veterans as a threat. Military service had given them confidence, experience, and a stronger belief in their rights as citizens. For extremists committed to racial segregation, this was unacceptable. Violence followed. The contrast was shocking. In France, the Hellfighters had been praised. At home, many were treated as second-class citizens. The democracy they had defended overseas remained incomplete in their own country. No story illustrates this tragedy more clearly than that of Henry Johnson. Chapter 9. The Fall of a Hero. Henry Johnson returned from the war carrying the wounds of battle. The injuries he sustained during his famous fight never fully healed. His body suffered, his health declined, and opportunities remained scarce. Despite his extraordinary bravery, Johnson struggled to find stable employment. The nation that had benefited from his sacrifice offered little support. As years passed, his circumstances worsened. Medical problems continued, financial difficulties mounted, and public memory of his heroism began to fade. In 1929, Henry Johnson died at the age of just 32. He died poor, largely forgotten. The hero who had saved a fellow soldier and defeated a German raiding party almost disappeared from history. For decades, his story received little attention. Many Americans had never heard his name. His achievements remained buried beneath layers of neglect. Then, slowly, historians began uncovering the truth. Researchers examined military records. Journalists told his story. Advocates pushed for recognition. Finally, nearly a century after his act of heroism, justice began to arrive. In 2015, President Barack Obama awarded Henry Johnson the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. The recognition came 97 years after his famous battle. It was long overdue, but it ensured that Johnson would not be forgotten. Chapter 10: The Legacy of the Hellfighters. Today, the Harlem Hellfighters occupy a place of honor in American history. Museums display their photographs. Books tell their stories. Documentaries celebrate their achievements. Their service challenged racist stereotypes. Their courage inspired future generations. And their music helped shape modern culture. The influence of James Reese Europe and the Hellfighters Band can still be heard today. Every jazz musician who followed walked a path they helped create. Their military achievements also paved the way for change within the armed forces. Although segregation continued for decades, the record of units like the 369th made discrimination increasingly difficult to justify. The Hellfighters proved what should never have required proof. Courage has no color, patriotism has no color, and heroism has no color. Their story remains one of resilience, determination, and the struggle for recognition in a world reluctant to give it. Outro. The Harlem Hellfighters entered World War I determined to serve their country. They fought in the trenches of France, endured artillery bombardments, faced enemy attacks, and earned the respect of allies and enemies alike. They introduced jazz to Europe, produced heroes like Henry Johnson, and built one of the most remarkable combat records of the entire war. Yet when they returned home, many faced discrimination, violence, and neglect. Their achievements were ignored, their sacrifices minimized, and their stories nearly vanished from history. But history has a way of finding the truth. Today, we remember the Harlem Hellfighters not as forgotten soldiers, but as pioneers, warriors, musicians, and heroes. They proved that bravery is not determined by race. They proved that service deserves recognition. And they proved that even when a nation fails to honor its heroes, history eventually will. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more incredible stories from world history. This is Region of World History. Thank you for watching.